Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Beyond Law CLC, we welcome you all. Amongst us, we have, though the participants, needless to say, that they are already there. But amongst us, today we have Honorable Mr. Justice Vinay Mittal, who is a former judge of Punjab Haryana High Court, and Avnish Mittal, who is one of the leading lawyers on the civil side, who will give their inputs on rent law, personal necessity of land law, and means profit. More emphasis on East Punjab Rent Restriction Act 1940. Devika, we can share the screen sharing subsequently. Just stop for right now. Devika? Yes. So you will have to unmute yourself, and Avnish, you too have to unmute yourself. Yes. Avnish? On the right side, Avnish, you will have to see the unmute part.
I have, yeah. Am I audible?
So,
Am I audible, Vikas? Am I audible, Vikas?
Yes, sir, you are audible. I can ask from the other people who are on the, they can post it on the chat box. Avnish, just a test from your side.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. So amongst us, we have Honorable Mr. Justice Vinay Mittal, as I was saying. He has been a former judge of Punjab Haryana High Court and as well as of Madhya Pradesh High Court. And the speed in which he used to dispose of the cases, I can vouch upon that. The areas for that particular aspect could never have been an issue. But every man and every judge, every lawyer has his own style every way. It's just like what we say, as all fingers cannot be equal. Every person has his own role, maybe as a judge, as a lawyer. And today, the most fascinating part is, it's one of the rare occasions where father and son will be giving the inputs. And more so, they are, as we've also written on another curtain raiser, one is a 4th generation lawyer and another is a 5th generation lawyer. Mr. Avnish is an avid writer also. His various inputs on legal aspects are invariably seen on different platforms. And once you are a judge and who has disposed of around 50,000 cases, that speaks volumes. Even the articles cannot match up the speed in which they have been done. But one thing was for sure when Justice Vinay Mittal was there, not only he was an erudite speaker, but his immense knowledge to grasp the things. Sometimes it was always fascinating to observe that how could that voluminous brief could be skimmed up and summed up in the right way. Though at the end of the webinar, meaning there where when the question and answer will be there, we will ask him that, because as a lawyer also everybody wants to know that art, because sometimes you're from the respondent side or once the party comes. What is that art to learn the skills to understand the entire file? Like in Hindi or Punjabi, we say, oh, files ko soong lete the, what is there in the crux of the entire case. And Avnish, undoubtedly, as they say, it's in the genes. He also has those acumens. So on behalf of Beyond Law CLC, we again welcome them. One aspect we will just, since the aspect is divided primarily into two aspects. One is on personal necessity. On that, Mr. Justice Vinay Mittal has consented to give his insights. And Mr. Avnish would be giving his insights on mean profit. And when we take the question and answer session, at that point of time, both of them would be kind enough to give their insights. So it's a pleasure when there are father-son duo. We have seen father-son in cricket, one giving the commentary like Mr. Amarnath and one playing the cricket. But it's a rare occasion where father-son in movies one can find, but not otherwise on a platform. Yes, in legal side, they can assist each other. But giving different aspects, different inputs will be a treat for not only for the ears, but also for the legal minds in its own way. Thank you, both of you and all the participants who are with us on the platform, as well as those who are watching us live on the Facebook, to have the insights from the persons who are known in their own way and who they've created their own niche it was always a pleasure hearing Justice Vinay Mittal as a lawyer when he was a designated senior, as well as when he was a judge. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Vikas. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon, the team of Beyond CLC, Beyond Law and CLC, Mr. Vikas Chatrat. I thank you very much for having me here on a fascinating topic, which has not only fascinated me during my professional days as a lawyer, but has also been my favorite subject while I was a judge. Because this is one of those things, the relationship between landlord and tenant is rather very complex. But it's more complex because of the law which regulates the relationship. Otherwise, as two human beings, they may not have that kind of problem with each other. But because of the law, problems have arisen. And before I start on the topic, I must thank you, Vikas, for providing me this rare opportunity to share this professional platform with my son Avnish. I've seen him growing from a very young infant to a big man. I've seen him, I have contributed to his grooming also as a human being. But it is for the first time in my life, and probably his life also, that we are sharing a professional platform. And for that matter, I'm really, really thankful to you, Vikas, so much. Can you hear me, everybody?
Thank you, sir. Avnish, just a word from your side, and then we will set the stage rolling.
Avnish? Good evening. Hi. Yes.
Yes. You can. I just said you can just start one line, then we'll ask Justice Vinay Mittal to take over and give the insights to the person hearing.
Good evening, everybody, and let me start by thanking Vikasji and Team Beyond Law CLC for providing me with this excellent platform to share my opinion about the one of my favorite subjects, that is about the rent preposition under the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act. I'm also grateful and thankful to Team Beyond Law CLC for letting me share this platform with my mentor, with whom I have learned the professional skills, whatever little I have. So over to Justice Mittal. So let him start, and then we can continue on this.
Sir, before that, because Alok has posted the message that the voice is cracking a bit, I will just ask everyone to post it on the chat as to what is because I felt that probably it could have been from my side. The participants who are on the platform, could you just share? Yes, sir, they are saying probably there's a problem of the bandwidth, etc. Avnish, could you just get it checked out, because it was cracking? I thought that probably it could have been from my side.
Yeah, let me just have a look.
Not from your side primarily, it is from Justice Vinay Mittal's side.
I will see.
I think band crack kar rahe. I had done it. Video off.
I think now it's better. Just say one line.
Can you hear me properly now?
Oh, now it's better. Much better.
Video.
Yes, it's audible. Avnish, it's audible now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
These are few glitches which we see on this platform. Yes.
So yes, now sir. On to the subject, Vikas. Everybody, I welcome to this webinar. It's all the efforts of Mr. Chatrat. The topic today, which we have chosen ourselves to discuss, is rent laws, personal necessity of landlord, with more emphasis on the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act 1949. Now, rent is not a term of art. It is neither a term defined by science. The term has essentially evolved out of human relationship itself. That is, the relationship between the landlord and tenant is probably an outcome of the barter system, which the mankind has always known in the very beginning, when there was no currency, when there was no formal trading and anything. So the idea was, I have something, you have something, I need that what you have, and I want to give what I can give you. So therefore, that was the barter. The same is, I want X's house. Doesn't need it. So I need it. I get his house. I have the money. So therefore, I'm paying him, and that is what is rent. That is what is there. Now, it doesn't transfer the thing, the house to me. It doesn't. The only thing for use and occupation of that house, I'm giving him the consideration, that is the rent. Now, rent has not been defined anywhere under the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act. It has not been defined under the Haryana Rent Control Act or 95 Act as well. But as I understand, it may not have been defined under the various other enactments of the states. But I can find a definition of the rent under the Punjab Tenancy Act 1887. Section 4.3 thereof says rent means whatever is paid to a landlord in money, kind, or service by a tenant on account of the use or occupation of land held by him. Now, so therefore, what was originally an informal barter system has been formalized here by including it in the statute book. The Cambridge Dictionary defines rent and says a fixed amount of money that you pay regularly for the use of a room, house, car, television, etc., that someone else owns. Now, kindly just keep in mind, the ownership is somebody else's. It doesn't come back to the other person. For use and occupation of that ownership of somebody else, for this you pay rent. Oxford Dictionary defines rent as to regularly pay money to somebody so that you can use something that they own, such as a house, a room, some land, etc. Another meaning to the rent assigned by Oxford Dictionary itself says rent something means to pay money to somebody so that you can use something for a short period of time. Now, very important thing is short period of time. There's no permanency. It has to return back to the person who owns it. Now, somebody said laws are not made by human beings, but by accidents or misfortunes, war, epidemics, famine, or a succession of bad seasons. So it is with rent control laws. The rent control laws owe their origin to the World Wars. The First World War I. After it was over, there was an acute shortage of housing, and the rents as a result was steep hike. To control that, to regulate that, the rent control legislations were brought into the statute book. But the area was confined primarily to the European Union or European countries. But after the World War II, when a similar situation arose and the problem was worldwide, then the rent legislations became omnipresent, kind of global present. So therefore, it spread to the entire civilization. What is a rent law? A rent law is primarily the regulation of conduct between the two persons, landlord and tenant. Landlord, the do's and don'ts for landlord and tenant. The landlord will do this. He will provide amenities. The tenant will do this. He will keep the house maintenance rented to him in a proper maintenance and use it like in a husband-like manner, as they say. The landlord will provide all cleanliness, maintenance, and other things which are major in nature, which are required to be maintained by him. The tenant will use the house as his own to that extent that he will not let it be damaged in any. These are the do's and don'ts. This is one of the considerations. The other is rent. Rent has to be fixed, paid by the tenant in time as agreed between the parties, and the landlord will not get a hike on its own like that. You can't say from tomorrow I will have this much of rent. But if at all, the landlord wants a hike, he, yes, because any problem? Because I can't hear you.
So audibility, Avnish will have to check it because it's varying. Probably the bandwidth is not correct on your side. If need
Probably
be,
from
then Avnish-
our side, it is working all right. But let me just have a check again.
because everyone is saying that the voice is varying. Because I also felt that. Because at your
My
end,
voice is coming all right.
it's fine. Yours is fine. I don't know at Justice Vinay Mittal's side.
It is the same internet connection. So let me just have a check again.
Or what you can do is just ask sir to come at this place and address it.
Yes, I will.
Meanwhile, you can check on that end. Avnish, in fact, at your place, it's showing that network is quite low.
आप इधर आओ मेरे को कैसे करेगा तू हटा लो उसको
In fact, Avnish, it was showing that the bandwidth at your end is down. Though at your end it was audible, but it was reflecting on your screen that the bandwidth is low.
Is it all right now?
Now it's better. Yes. Yes, sir, we can try now.
Now is it all right, Mr. Chhatri?
It's still cracking.
Still cracking.
Now try it again.
मैंने यहाँ से म्यूट कर रखा है
ऊपर चले.
Sir,
Now
just
please.
try.
Is it all right?
Yes, sir, better.
Better.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully.
Yes, sir.
Anyway.
So these are the challenges which one has. Avnish, one minute.
I was on rent law. To start again a little bit,
Yes.
what is rent law? Rent law is, in fact, a regulation do's and don'ts for both the parties. It tells the landlord to do something to maintain the house, not to stop the amenities is don't. The tenant doesn't have to damage the house that is his own. It just got disconnected, Mr. Chatar.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Sir, office basement,
sorry, yes.
that's the issue. Yes, sir.
We have started, otherwise we could have gone on the first floor also.
Avnish can go there meanwhile. Yes, sir, you can start.
I will.
Yes, sir.
Go to my study. So therefore, the rent law, as I was saying, the landlord cannot on one fine morning say, I want a hike in rent. No, that is not permissible in law. Rent law will not permit it. If he wants a hike and increase in the rent, he has to approach the authorities under Section 4 of the Act for fixation of the fair rent, and then the fair rent would be fixed on the basis of the formula given under the provision. The rent law, all the rent laws to start with, were enacted, legislated as a temporary measure to meet with the aftermath of the world wars and to meet the problems of shortage of the housing and the steep hike in rents and all that. But with the passage of time, they have almost acquired a permanency because of the vested interests involved and probably because of the vote banks also. The validity and continuation of the rent laws has been challenged a number of times before the various high courts and even the apex court. But all through, the challenges were rejected on the ground that the social and economic conditions in the country required a strict control and restrictions, and therefore it was not appropriate to remove the rent laws from the scene at that point of time. It would be very appropriate for me to quote from a judgment of Justice Sarkaria in the case of Nagindas Ramdas versus Dalpat Ram Icharam. This is 1974 SCC Volume 1 242 or AIR 1974 SC 471. The strain of the last World War, Industrial Revolution, the large-scale exodus of the working people to the urban areas, and the social and political changes brought in their wake social problems of considerable magnitude and complexity and their concomitant evils. The country was faced with spiraling inflation, soaring cost of living, increasing urban population, and scarcity of accommodation. Rack renting and large-scale eviction of tenants under the guise of the ordinary law exacerbated those conditions, making the economic life of the community unstable and insecure. To tackle these problems and curb these evils, the legislatures of the states in India enacted rent control legislations. Now, after the World War II was over, the British government imposed property tax in India, to set off the cost of the war. Now, that additional taxation on the property resulted in very steep hike in the rents. To check that, to control that, Punjab Rent Act 1941 was enacted. It was a temporary law for a period of 5 years alone, but was extended. The appointed date in that case was for fixation of rent was 1st of January 1939. After that, that act was, the tenure of that act was over, the extended period was also over. The present East Punjab Urban Rent Restriction Act 1949 came into existence. When I am saying present, in fact, I should have said erstwhile, because after the 1949 Act, the present law, which is operating in the state of Punjab, is Punjab Rent Control Law, Punjab Rent Control Act 1995. However, Section 75 of the said Act, while repealing the 1949 Act, says that all proceedings continuing or continued under the 1949 Act, all rights and duties having accrued to the parties under the 1949 Act shall be enforced and continued under the new Act. Therefore, for all practical purposes, the 1949 Act and its soul and body remains alive and relevant even for today. Prior to the rent legislations, the relationship between the parties, that is the landlord and tenant, was governed by the provisions of Transfer Property Act. Section 105, in fact, provided for lease, defined lease, what is lease, what is a lessor, what is lessee, and all that kind of thing. Then the succeeding sections thereafter provided for the termination, the method of termination, the grounds of termination. 106 provided for a notice to be given by a landlord to the tenant for termination of the tenancy and the method in which the notice was required to be given. 110 of the provision provided for grounds of eviction, and the first ground, 111, and the first ground A, was by afflux of time limited by the contract. Now, after the enactment of the special legislations, 1949 Act, 1941 Act, the ejectment, etc., are to be governed by these rent control legislations. Section 13 of the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act is the only section under which a ejectment of a tenant can be got by the landlord. It starts with a non-obstante clause, says, notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, notwithstanding anything in any contract, compromise, consent, or any other law, no tenant shall be ejected except on the grounds following therein. So therefore, Transfer Property Act, the agreement between the parties, everything goes except Section 13 states. If the landlord can bring his case within the parameters of Section 30, the ejectment may be permitted, otherwise tenant stays. Now, one of the grounds under Section 13 is 13(1)(3)(a), which provides for the ground of personal necessity to the landlord. I'll read Section 13. 13(1)(3)(a) says, a landlord may apply to the controller for an order directing the tenant to put the landlord in possession 1I. In the case of a residential building, that was originally, it was the section. If he requires it for his own occupation, and if he is not occupying another residential building in the urban area concerned, and he has not vacated such a building without sufficient cause after the commencement of this act in the said urban area. Almost identical provisions exist in various other state legislations like Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Bombay, etc., with a word here and there. But primarily, the body soul of the language remains the same. I shall confine my discussion only to the East Punjab Urban Restriction Act. One thing very important is, as the original section we have read, originally in 1949, that is prior to 1956, when the act was enacted in 1949, the ground of personal necessity was available to a landlord qua all types of building, that is the residential building as well as the non-residential building. He could always come and say, I want this building for my personal necessity by bona fide need, and therefore even a non-residential building would be available for ejectment for his needs. But in 1956, the act was amended and the phrase non-residential building, non-residential was struck off, deleted. And thereafter, the effect was the ground for personal necessity of the landlord remained available only qua a residential building. That was in 1956. From 1956, for a period of almost 4 decades, everybody accepted that amendment. The landlords were happy, whatever. The tenants were happy. Everybody was happy. There was no challenge, no nothing, everything good. But in 1996, a challenge was made to the aforesaid amendment. And the Apex Court, in the case of Harbilas Rai Bansal versus the state of Punjab and another, AIR 1996, Supreme Court 857, struck down that amendment of 1956. It was said by the Supreme Court that the said amendment was discriminatory, unconstitutional, and therefore was struck down as such on that ground. It made a distinction between residential and non-residential building for absolutely no justification. That was the reason. After the amendment was struck down by the Supreme Court in Harbilas Rai Bansal's case, the legal position became as it was prior to 1956. That is, buildings, both residential as well as non-residential, became available to the landlord for seeking an ejectment on the ground of personal necessity. Now, therefore, to that extent, the law has traveled a little bit from the originally very strict to liberal one. But now one more thing, an ejectment application is filed by the landlord on the ground of personal necessity of a building, residential or non-residential, as I said. There is a kind of a presumption which the rent controller shall always carry. That is, the need of the landlord is bona fide. But that presumption is not such presumption which is that whatever the landlord says is taken to be a gospel truth. The landlord has to, the ground or the ejectment of the tenant is not available to the landlord on mere asking, on as a mere wish or a mere desire. He has to travel all the way to prove that he needs the premises and he bona fide requires it for his personal necessity. The ground In Banke Ram's, there's one more thing. In Banke Ram's case, while examining the question of Banke Ram's case is AIR 1977, Punjab and Haryana, 158. It's a full bench judgment. Banke Ram versus Saraswati Devi. It said that the ingredients of section 13(3)(a)(1)(i) have to be strictly construed by the court and has to be proved to the satisfaction of the court by the landlord before enjectment of the tenant can be ordered. The full bench said, to sum up, the reply to the question referred for decision is that it is essential for a landlord to plead the ingredients of subclauses B and C of paragraph 1I of section 13(3)(a) of the Act in its eviction application. Now, that was primarily the answer of the reference by the full bench. But in para 12 of the full bench judgment, to mitigate the hardships of the landlord and also to provide him some kind of a pathway where he could meet the requirements, the full bench observed, para 12 I am reading, in the present case, we are concerned only with the question as a principle of law as to whether it is essential to plead in an eviction application the ingredients of subclauses B and C, and not the question that if in a particular case these ingredients are not pleaded, but the parties have led evidence with regard to them, what will be the effect? In any given case where facts have not been averred in the pleading, a number of questions can arise as to whether proper evidence has been adduced by the landlord regarding those facts which do not find place in the pleadings. And secondly, whether such evidence will be admissible or not. And lastly, whether the tenant was taken by surprise or not and had led evidence with full knowledge of the requisite contentions raised by the landlord, and whether the tenant has in those circumstances been prejudiced or not. The court would be required to give full consideration to the contentions raised by the respective parties and the facts and circumstances of each case before giving its decision in favor of the landlord or the tenant. But the decisions of the High Courts of the Supreme Court in this regard cannot be of any avail to detract from the validity of the proposition that it is necessary for the landlord the ingredients of subclauses B and C. However, it may be made clear that when it is held that it is essential to plead the ingredients of subclauses B and C in the eviction application by the landlord, it should not be understood that under no circumstances, in the absence of pleadings, the evidence regarding the ingredients envisaged in subclauses B and C can be looked into. This is not peculiar to the eviction applications. Similar considerations come into operation even in the case of suits, which are governed by the specific and detailed provisions of the Code of Civil Procedure regarding pleadings. Now, therefore, even it emerges that even when no pleadings are contained in the ejectment petition, but evidence has been led to the knowledge which satisfies the court with regard to the ingredients, and the tenant is not taken by any surprise, then the non-pleading of the ingredients in the ejectment petition shall not be taken as fatal. Now, the ingredients which are required to be proved to the satisfaction of the court by a landlord are: number one, he requires it for his own occupation. This clause has been interpreted a number of times. He means the landlord. Requires it. Requires means bona fide requires, not a mere wish and desire. Requirement has to be shown and proved. For his own occupation. Own occupation would also mean the occupation or need of his own need, his need of his family members which are residing with him and dependent upon him. And therefore, if the son of a landlord, the daughter of a landlord, the other persons of the family members of landlord and the landlord himself require the building, that would be covered under clause 1. Number 2 is he is not occupying another building in the urban area concerned. Now, the landlord is not occupying another building. Another building means a building which is suitable for his requirement. Not a building that he has 1 or 2 rooms more somewhere else. So therefore, this is another building. No, a building which is suitable for the requirement of the landlord. And like the landlord is requiring residing in 3 rooms, let's say, the tenant has 5 rooms or a bigger accommodation. The landlord has another 2-room building somewhere, at 2-3 rooms building somewhere. So the court or the tenant cannot be heard to say that no, you have another building. So why can't you half your family shift there, half your family shift here? No. The building, another building should be sufficient for his requirement. If he has such a sufficient building, then he cannot seek the ejectment. Then the third requirement is he has not vacated such a building without sufficient cause after the commencement of this act in the said urban area. He has not vacated such a building without sufficient cause. The important thing is sufficient cause. If there is a sufficient cause, like the building was there with the landlord, but there's a partition of the family, the major portion or the whole portion has gone to somebody, his brother, his son, his uncle, his joint family and all that. So he loses the control of that part. It cannot be said that he has vacated the building without sufficient cause. He's vacated the building for a sufficient cause. Or let us say the landlord himself was a tenant over some other building, but there was a ejectment order, he had to vacate that building. So therefore he has vacated the building for sufficient cause. And the other thing is, in the urban area concerned, suppose the landlord is requiring living at Chandigarh and wanting the tenanted portion from the tenant at Chandigarh, and he has a building at Ambala, it cannot be heard that he has a building somewhere else, so in some urban area. It is not some urban area, it is this urban area concerned. So therefore, if all these requirements are met and sufficiently shown to the satisfaction of the court, then the ejectment of the tenant on the ground of personal necessity can be ordered. Now, one more important thing which would be taken into consideration is landlord shall be taken to be the sole judge of his needs. Court cannot sit over the judgment over his requirements. The tenant cannot be heard to suggest that let him have this. Suppose the landlord is residing on the 2nd floor, he wants to shift on the ground floor. He cannot be heard that why can't you remain on the 2nd floor only? What is wrong? Why should you come to ground floor? Or the landlord has 4 members of the family, they have 5 rooms. He wants a bigger accommodation. It cannot be heard by anybody that the tenant suggests that there are only 4 members, they have 5 rooms, what for they require it? Landlord is the sole judge of his needs, and therefore nobody else can sit in judgment over those. This being his privilege, that privilege has to be maintained. But the only thing is the need of the landlord, the requirement of the landlord should be real, not illusory or a mere wish. That has to be taken care of. Once that is covered, that distance is covered by the landlord, then the tenant has to vacate. Now, one more thing with regard to the judicial legislation. When the Haryana Rent Control Act 1973 was enacted, the requirement of bona fide person requirement of the landlord was only the residential building. Non-residential building was not included, and therefore the ground was not available qua the non-residential building. In the case of this is Ved Prakash Gupta, that is the case is State of Haryana versus Ved Prakash Gupta and other, 1999, PLR 482, a challenge was made to the aforesaid provision, and relying upon Harbilas Rai Bansal's case, a division bench of Punjab and High Court said that this non-inclusion of the building, non-residential building, is discriminatory, unconstitutional, and therefore this clause must be included and the ground must be available qua non-residential building also. To my mind, in my humble opinion, this is a clear case of judicial legislation which is not permissible in law. This is for all of you to think over. But the settled principle is, it is for the legislature to frame law and judiciary to interpret it. Judicial legislation is not permissible. After feeling the need of the landlords, two more provisions were added to section 13A. 13A was with regard to specified landlords, where a government servant was due to retire within 1 year or had already retired, then he would be treated as a specified landlord and he could get his house vacated for his personal requirement and user. And in that situation, the procedure which should be followed by the rent controller would be a summary procedure. And after ejectment order is passed, there will be no appeal available. That's one part. Second is section 13B. A similar provision was made for NRI landlords, where non-resident Indians who wanted to shift to India and had a house of their own could get it vacated for their personal necessity. Similarly, summary procedure would be followed, and after the ejectment order is passed, there will be no appeal. One more thing at this stage would be considered, must be considered, that is the rent control laws, as we said seen in the very beginning, were enacted to mitigate the hardships of the tenants and looking into the shortage of the accommodation. From 1949 or 1941 to 2020, more than 70, 80 years have passed. After all this has happened, the country has undergone a sea change. The society has become very liberal. The things are now totally different. People are making lots of investments. They are making investments in mutual funds. They are making investments in stocks and shares They are making investments in gold. They are making investments in business. The making of all these investments is to make more money, to make money for living, to have a vocation in life. Therefore, all this is permissible and this is good. But if somebody makes an investment in a house and wants to earn out of it by making a living, by giving it to a tenant on rent, well, he has lost the house. Because immediately on occupation of the house by the tenant, the rigors of the Rent Control Acts would come in. Yes.
No, sir. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. The rigors of the rent control law would apply. Now just imagine a case of a widow. Her husband has died. She is the inheritor of a big property, huge property, some property. The tenant is there in that property. The tenant is a big jeweler, carrying on his business, having belonging to a rich society, strata of society. The rent fixed for the premises is meager, peanuts. In that situation, when the widow approaches the rent controller for ground of person's necessity or for vacation, the law says she is a rich landlady, rich landlord, and the rich jeweler is a poor tenant, destitute, requiring the protection of law. Is it fair? A poor widow and a rich jeweler, no balance between them, the law will not say, because the protection is for tenants, and therefore every tenant, rich or poor, is a poor tenant. This, to my mind, is not fair. It requires a change. Why can't a person, like all other investors, investing in stocks and shares, broking, jewelry, gold, this, that, so many things, why can't he invest in property and give it on rent and have income from that property and be free? Why can't the law of contract govern the property? The things are different now. There's no shortage of housing. So why the protection? Before this is with regard to this, one more and very recent aspect is the right to property is now considered to be a human right. It's not only a constitutional right. Earlier it was a fundamental right. That is gone. 31 is taken away. But now it is a constitutional right under section 300A. But it is also considered to be a human right. In the case of Indore Vikas Pradhikaran versus Messrs. Pure Industrial Coke and Chemicals, 2007-8 SCC 705, it was said, earlier Supreme Court said, earlier human rights existed to the claim of individual's right to health, right to livelihood, right to shelter and employment, etc. But now property rights are also incorporated within the definition of human rights. And therefore, in the light of this, the landlords ask, lex injusta, non est lex, meaning thereby, unjust laws are not laws. That is what the landlords say. Why should an unjust law remain on the statute book? In this regard, I will quote with some advantage two observations from the judgments of the Supreme Court. One is D.C. Bhatia and others versus Union of India, and another 1995 1 SCC 104. Para 22 I am referring to, I am quoting. We are unable to uphold any of these contentions. The rent tax were enacted originally as a temporary measure in order to protect the tenants from eviction and also from arbitrary enhancements of rent. Before these rent taxes were passed, rights and obligations of landlords and tenants were regulated by the provisions of the Transfer Property Act, which was enacted in 1882. The rent laws which were passed by various state legislatures drastically curtailed the landlord's power to enhance rent and evict the tenant. The question whether these restrictions were justified in law or not was raised in a large number of cases before this court and the high courts. The challenges were turned down by the courts on the ground that these restrictions were necessary, having regard to the economic conditions of the country at that time. Again, the observations of the Supreme Court in the case of Malpe Vishwanath Acharya and others versus State of Maharashtra and another, AIR 1998, Supreme Court 602. Now this is these are observations made by Justice B.N. Kirpal in Supreme Court. There is a considerable judicial authority in support of the submission of the learned counsel for the appellants that with the passage of time, a legislation which was justified when enacted may become arbitrary and unreasonable with the change in circumstances. This is what has happened. Insofar as social legislation like the Rent Control Act is concerned, the law must strike a balance between rival interests and it should try to be just to all. The law ought not to be unjust to one and give a disproportionate benefit or protection to another section of the society. When there is a shortage of accommodation, it is desirable, nay, necessary, that some protection should be given to the tenants in order to ensure that they are not exploited. At the same time, such a law has to be revised periodically so as to ensure that a disproportionate larger benefit than the, than the one which was intended is not given to the tenants. When enacting socially progressive legislation, the need is greater to approach the problem from a holistic perspective and not to have a narrow or short-sighted parochial approach, giving a greater than due emphasis to a vocal section society results not merely in the miscarriage of justice, but in the abdication of responsibility of the legislative authority. Social legislation is treated with deference by the courts, not merely because the legislature represents the people, but also because in representing them, the entire spectrum of views is expected to be taken into account. The legislature is not shackled by the same constraints as the courts of law, but its power is coupled with the responsibility. It is also the responsibility of the courts to look at legislation from the altar of Article 14 of the Constitution. This article is intended, as is obvious from its words, to check this tendency, giving underperformance to some others. Time has come to give a free hand to the market forces. Now, this is unquote. Time has come to give a free hand to the market forces. This would take care of housing and give it the required boost, and also take care of the shortage of housing. To my mind, laissez-faire is the best policy for the day. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Vikas. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And as we had informed to the participants, since there were two facets to be discussed in the today's session, Justice Vinay Mittal has been kind enough to give the insights of personal necessity of the landlord. And the second facet of the webinar, that is the means profit, we had requested Mr. Avnish Mittal, as I had already informed that he has been writing various articles on different platforms. But as they say that the visual treat and the audibility, as we say that the audible books nowadays are much in demand. So we said that his knowledge only through writings will not reach the larger audience and it will not create that impact. So you should inform and give the insights rather than just simpliciter reading. Because reading simpliciter, I would say it's a 2D effect that one is reading and other is going inside. But once you are actually seeing, it's more like a 3D effect that you are reading also, understanding also. And it also registers more in the mind when you are hearing, especially from a person who is an erudite speaker plus a person with immense knowledge. Mr. Avnish, over to you. And then anybody who wants the questions to be taken up, once Mr. Avnish gives the insights on means profit, then we will take questions on both the issues, primarily on this. And we will be taking issues only on personal necessities and means profit, since the act itself is quite large. And then the entire crux is easier to understand for all the participants. Over to you, Avnish.
Thank you, Vikasji, for giving me this so much of praise, which I don't know whether I actually deserve or not. But then in any case, it sounds good from hearing it from a good friend. Well, now that we have discussed about the concept of mean profits and what exactly is an we have already discussed about the concept of rent and the concept of ejectment. So one of the questions that comes is that when an ejectment petition is filed, be it on a ground of personal necessity, be it on any of the grounds as envisaged under Section 13, then after an ejectment order is passed by the rent controller, what happens? The stage comes, firstly, whether the tenant would vacate the premises after getting an ejectment order from the rent controller. He may, but then that is very unlikely because a tenant who would drag the landlord into litigation would not vacate it at the mere asking of the rent controller or by merely having an ejectment order from one forum. In case he chooses to file an appeal before the appellate authority or any prescribed authority as under the different enactments, then the question arises is that whether he'll be bound by contractual rent. Now, this concept of mean profits, it does not find mention anywhere in any of the enactments of the rent legislation. So, in plain and simple language, it would mean that a person deriving any sort of income from being in unlawful possession of the property would be called as mean profits. That is the mean income, and that is the mean profit, what we broadly call it. This definition is not defined anywhere in the rent legislation. The history of this word goes back to medieval times. It relates back to the time when kings used to give the land to their barons and in return would ask them that provide me with the army of soldiers. So gradually this concept also commercialized, and this concept gradually turned out whereby the king also used to demand some kind of loot from the money in the form of money other than just mere army. So in order to accommodate that particular situation, the barons used to give the land to the farmers, and farmers would get their yield out of it, and some part of the yield would be given to barons in the form of money or crops or whatever, and that amount will be ultimately given to the kings. So the barons in that situation were called intermediate landlord, or in the French we would say it would mean mean landlords. So this word mean profits is basically an offshoot of that term, that the intermediate landlords were called mean landlords, and from there this term evolved gradually into various sectors of property. So like I said before, this definition would not find mention anywhere in the Rent Act. So let us refer to section 2 subclause 12 of CPC, the Code of Civil Procedure, which defines mean profit as, I'm reading section 2 subclause 12 of CPC. Mean profit of a property means those profits which the person in wrongful possession of such property actually received or might with ordinary diligence have received therefrom, together with interest on such profits, but shall not include profits due to improvements made by the person in wrongful possession. So broadly, it would say that it would include the benefit that a person is deriving by being in wrongful possession of the property, but any improvement made by it, made by the person in wrongful possession, and any income, extra income that he derives because of that, that would not be included in the concept of mean profits. This term was originally used for the rural property, the agricultural land, and the properties in the rural areas. But gradually, the landlord and tenant disputes also started using this concept. This concept was as new to the rent legislation as this term is. But in Atmaram Properties, which was the first case pertaining to mean profits, the concept of mean profits in rent law, this preposition was dealt with. I'll be referring to Atmaram Properties. This is Atmaram Property, Messrs. Atmaram Properties Private Limited versus Messrs. Federal Motors Private Limited, 2005, Volume 1, RCR Rent, page 1. Now, before I read the relevant portion, I would just describe what exactly was Atmaram Properties about. Atmaram Properties was a case under Delhi Rent Act. It was a case pertaining to the property that was in Connaught Place, Delhi. The tenant was in possession of the property since 1944 at a meager amount of rupees 371 rupees. So 371 rupees since 1944, and ultimately the landlord, he files an ejectment petition against the tenant on account of subletting. He says that I want the premises back because you have violated the terms and conditions of the property. So the rent controller allows the ejectment petition. The tenant goes in appeal. Now, when the tenant goes in appeal, as under Section 38 of the Delhi Rent Control Act 1958, the tribunal, the rent tribunal, as under the Delhi Act, he puts the tenant to some terms that, all right, I'll give you stay, but then because I'm giving you an interim order, so therefore you have to be, you have to pay more than the contractual rate. So that amount was ultimately challenged. That amount that was fixed as 15,000 by the rent tribunal, that amount was challenged by the by the tenant before the High Court. Delhi High Court removed that condition and said, no, this is a unreasonable condition. Interim order cannot be on the basis of anything which is over and above the contractual rate of rent. since the matter is sub judice. So the High Court removed that condition of 15,000 rupees. The matter reached Supreme Court. Now here is what exactly Supreme Court held. Now let us read Atmaram Properties, para number 6 I would be referring to. Vikasji, can I have my notes? Or if you have shared with everybody, that should be all right. So para number 6 of this said judgment would say, the order of eviction passed by the learned rent controller is appealable to the Rent Control Tribunal under Section 38 of the Act. There is no specific provision in the Act conferring the power of tribunal to grant stay of execution of the order of eviction passed by the controller, but subsection 3 of Section 38 confers the tribunal with all the powers vested in a court under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 while hearing an appeal. The provision empowers the tribunal to pass an order of stay by reference to Rule 5, Order 41 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, hereinafter referred to as Code. The position was not disputed by the learned counsel for appearing for either of the parties. Now in para number 7, the Honorable Supreme Court reproduces the extract from Order 41, Rule 5. So we can skip subclause 1 of Rule 5. Rule 5, stay of appellate court. We can skip subclause 1. Subclause 2 is not reproduced. Subclause 3 would be most relevant. No order of stay shall a stay of execution shall be made under subrule 1 or subrule 2 unless the court making it is satisfied A, that a substantial loss may result to the party applying for the stay of execution unless the order is made B, that the application has been made without unreasonable delay, and C, which is the most important, that security has been given by the applicant for the due performance of such decree or order as may ultimately be binding upon him. So the Honorable Supreme Court, firstly in para number 6, discusses that since there is no provision for stay, so therefore provisions of CPC as under Order 41 Rule 5 will be applicable. Then it reproduces Order 41 Rule 5. Order 41 Rule 5, subclause 3, subclause C says that in case a decree, this stay of a decree, the execution is to be stayed, then some terms and conditions has to be put to the person who is seeking the stay, so that ultimately, in case the litigation is decided either way, he should not be able to wriggle out of it. So on the basis of this, Section 18, the Honorable Supreme Court sums up saying, while passing an order of stay under Rule 5, Order 41 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, the appellate court does have the jurisdiction to put the applicant on such terms as would, in its opinion, reasonably compensate the decree holder for the loss occasioned in delay of execution of the decree by grant of stay order. In the event of the appeal being dismissed and insofar as those proceedings are concerned, such terms, needless to be to say, shall be reasonable. Subclause 2 says, in case the premises is governed by the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act 1958, in view of the definition of tenant contained in clause 1 of section 2 of the Act, the tenancy does not stand terminated merely by its termination under the Journal Law. It stands terminated with the passing of decree for eviction. With effect from that date, the tenant is liable to pay mean profits or compensation for the use and occupation of the premises at the same rate at which the landlord would be able to get the premises and earn the rent if the tenant would have vacated the premises. The landlord is not bound by the contractual rate of rent effective for the period preceding the date of decree. So the Supreme Court said that yes, because provisions of 41(5) are to be resorted to, so therefore, in case stay is to be granted to the tenant by the appellate tribunal, then some terms and conditions have to be imposed. Firstly, terms and conditions. Then those terms and conditions have to be reasonable. And if at all it is imposed and they are reasonable terms and conditions, then the next question would be that since when? Since when the tenant would be asked to pay anything more than the contractual rate of rent? The Supreme Court said that the date, the time for payment of mean profits or something more than the contractual rate of rent is the date when an ejectment order is passed by the rent controller. It would not be a date when the contract between the landlord and tenant ends and the ejectment would be automatic. It would be the date of ejectment order. So on the basis of this, Atmaram Properties laid down the concept of mean profits in the rent legislation. So para 19 would again lay down that 371.90 was the rent of the premises, like I said before, since 1944. And it was also pointed out, one of the interesting conditions that was imposed by the tribunal while passing on this judgment in Atmaram Properties, and which was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court also, the tribunal said that, all right, the tenant, I'm putting the tenant to terms, whereby rather than 371, he shall be paying 15,000 rupees as rent. The landlord moves an application stating that, look, the adjoining portion, my portion is 2,000 square feet in Connaught Place. The adjoining portion is being let out at the rate of rupees 3,50,000 rupees. So therefore, this is what I am entitled to. The court said no. It has to be in the shape of a compensation. It cannot be a windfall gain for you, that whereby the ejectment is ordered and you are entitled to 3.5 lakh rupees. And also, to strike a balance between the landlord and tenant, the tribunal as well as the Supreme Court upheld this provision that the amounts so deposited by the tenant over and above the contractual rate of rent shall be kept before the tribunal in a deposit. Because there may arise a situation when we are talking about an appeal that is sub judice, that is pending for decision. There might be a situation whereby the mean profits are assessed by the tribunal, the tenant is paying that, and ultimately the tenant wins the litigation. In that scenario, it will be next to impossible for the tenant to get back his money, what he has paid. So to protect tenants and to strike a balance, the tribunal said this money will be lying with me, and whosoever ultimately wins the litigation will get the money of mean profits. So this principle of Atmaram Properties with regard to mean profit was followed by a number of judgments by various high courts, and Supreme Court also time and again reiterated the same. Anderson Wright versus Amarnath Roy, this is AIR 2005, Supreme Court 2457, is one of the again one of the landmark judgments which has been followed number of times. This also relied upon Atmaram Properties with regard to the same principle. Now, then the next judgment, what I'll be relying upon is State of Maharashtra versus Messrs. Supermax International Private Limited. This is 2009, Volume 2, RCR Rent 246. Now, interestingly, this is a matter which was referred to 3 judges bench because the court felt that there is a conflict of decision between Atmaram Properties and Niaz Ahmed Khan. Niaz Ahmed Khan was again one of the judgments by Allahabad High Court, and ultimately the matter was decided by the Supreme Court. So, feeling that there was a conflict of decision between both the judgments, the matter was ultimately referred by the Supreme Court to a larger bench of 3 judges. In Supermax case, ultimately the Honorable Court found out that there is absolutely no dispute because the facts of the 2 cases and the position therein were altogether different. Atmaram Properties, like I've already mentioned, was a case where the ejectment was ordered by the rent controller. The appeal went before the rent tribunal, and because the appeal was pending, the tenant was put to terms. Niaz Ahmed, on the other hand, was a case where the tenant won before the rent controller. The landlord lost. The landlord went in appeal before the appellate authority. The appellate authority also dismissed his petition on any of the grounds. And when he approached the Allahabad High Court for an appeal against both those orders, the Allahabad High Court, while admitting the writ petition filed by the landlord, had put the tenant to terms in view of Atmaram Properties and asked the tenant to pay some amount over and above the contractual rate. The matter was ultimately considered by the Honorable Supreme Court, whereby the Supreme Court said, no, here was a case where the tenant lost. The Atmaram Properties was a case where the tenant had lost. So therefore, he was asked to be put to terms, and therefore he was asked to put
some amount over and above the contractual rate, which can be called as mean profit. But in Niaz Ahmed's case, because the tenant had won and the landlord had lost, so therefore the High Court is wrong in imposing such conditions. So ultimately, this Supermax case was decided on the basis of Atmaram Properties, holding that there is no dispute as far as Atmaram Properties and Niaz Ahmed's case is concerned. Now, all these judgments have been followed time and again by various high courts, various rent authorities in deciding various matters, irrespective of the position defined in their respective rent laws. I would also say that since we have discussed Atmaram Properties in detail, so Atmaram Properties has primarily laid down three things. Firstly, that appeal at the mean profits can be fixed at the time of filing of the appeal, as under Order 41 Rule 5, as there is no provision for stay. Secondly, it has to be reasonable. And thirdly, that it has to be on the termination of the tenancy at the time when the ejectment order is passed by the rent controller. And lastly, that amount is to be kept by the tribunal before the tribunal, and whosoever wins the litigation will get the share of the loot. So now let us, since we have discussed all these judgments, so let us analyze what exactly was the base of Atmaram Properties and what was exactly in the mind of the court at the time while fixing the mean profits in rent law. So I would be referring to Delhi Rent Control Act 1958, Section 38. Vikash, can I have that?
We are sharing. I have asked.
Yeah.
This is in. Okay. Devika, just share that.
Delhi Rent
That's
Control Act,
Yes.
Section 38.
It's at page 4.
Correct. Next to this. Again, next.
Yes.
Yeah, correct. So Delhi Rent Control Act 1958, Section 38 would say appeal to the tribunal. Subclause 1 would read, an appeal shall lie from every order of the controller made under this act only on questions of law to the rent control tribunal, hereinafter referred to as the tribunal, consisting of one person only to be appointed by the central government by notification in the official gazette. We can skip this. Subclause 2 also is not relevant. Subclause 3, I'll be relying upon subclause 3. Yes. The tribunal shall have all the powers vested in a court under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 when hearing an appeal. Now, because there is absolutely no provision for stay and rent control, like we all know that rent legislation is a code in itself. The rent controller is free to devise its own procedure, own rules, and it is not called as a civil court. It is a persona designator. There are full benches of our High Court. There are many judgments to say that strict principles of CPC are not applicable to East Punjab Rent Restriction Act. But under the Delhi Rent Control Act 1958, specifically while hearing an appeal under Section 38, this provision of CPC is been made applicable to the rent tribunal. Again, I'll read. The tribunal shall have all the powers vested in a court under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 when hearing an appeal. So once the tribunal is empowered under the provisions of civil law, the Code of Civil Procedure is applicable, then in order to stay the execution of the order passed by the rent controller or the rent authority as under the Delhi Act, he will have to resort to provisions of Order 41 Rule 5, which is the provision for staying the execution of a decree. And as we had read under subclause 3, that in case such a stay order is to be passed, then the person who is seeking stay can be put to some terms and conditions. Now, vis-a-vis this Delhi Rent Control Act, since our emphasis is on East Punjab Urban Rent Restriction Act 1949, I'll read the parallel provision as under our East Punjab Act. Section 15. Section 15 would deal with the vesting of appellate authority on the officers by state government. We can skip subclause 1. B also we can skip. Subclause 2 would be most relevant. On such an appeal being preferred, the appellate authority may order stay of further proceeding in the matter pending decision on an appeal. So,
Avneesh, just hold on. Avneesh, just hold on. Let 15.2 be done. Devika, just share 15.2.
15.2 is already on the screen.
No, it's 1A. Yes.
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 I'll read it again. Section 15, subclause 2 would say, on such appeal being preferred, the appellate authority may order stay of further proceedings in the matter pending decision on the appeal. So, resultantly, in our East Punjab Rent Restriction Act, there is a specific power of stay that is conferred to the appellate authority. Once that be so, whether provisions of CPC will be applicable, because if as an appellate authority, if a person is filing an appeal before the appellate authority and the appellate authority has to stay the execution of an order, that order shall not be stayed under 41.5, that will be stayed under 15.2. So once the difference is that 15.2 comes into play and 41.5 is not into play with regard to staying the execution of the order passed by the rent controller, then whether the provisions of CPC will be applicable, I would say no. Whether the provisions of Atmaram Properties would be applicable, no, because here under 15.2 there is a specific power of stay. So we cannot resort to we cannot go back to CPC under 41.5 or any other provision to say that this provision is applicable and this provision is not, because like I said before, Rent Control Act is a code in itself, whereby the rent controller and the appellate authority, they are popularly called persona designata. They are allowed to frame their own procedure and rules. And once there is a specific provision, the general provisions of CPC will not be applicable as far as mean profits is concerned. So, to my mind, this provision, as under the Atmaram Properties case, will not be applicable, though there are many judicial precedents, many decisions following Atmaram Properties, whereby time and again the courts have held the tenant that you have to pay more than the contractual rate if you are to enjoy the benefit of stay. But then this question still remains unanswered. It has not been dealt by any of the judgments. And all these judicial precedents, they simply follow Atmaram Properties, Supermax, and without going into the distinction between the two enactments, that is Delhi Rent Control Act and East Punjab Rent Restriction Act. But then the next question would be that in case the judicial precedents are there, rightly or wrongly, I would not comment on the correctness of those decisions. So once a decision has been taken that the tenant is to be put to some terms and conditions whereby he is liable to pay some mean profits, then taking it back to Atmaram Properties, the same principles would apply, that the same are to be in the shape of compensation, same are to be reasonable, and the same money is to be deposited in the court and only is to be dispersed to the party who ultimately wins the litigation. And lastly, the same has to be from the date of ejectment order. Now, all this would clearly show that firstly, mean profits is not there in the East Punjab Act. But if it is to be there, then there are all these four parameters which are to be followed by the courts. But another question that remains to be answered is that what is the basis of calculation? Whether it can be assumption. As a landlord, I would say that my property is priceless. I would say that yes, it is not 50,000, it should be 5 lakh rupees because this is what my property is worth. But then the court cannot take it as a gospel truth. There has to be some basis, some kind of evidence has to be looked into, some kind of lease deeds, some positive evidence has to be looked into on the basis of forming a basis with regard to calculation of mean profits. Now, this question ultimately came before the Supreme Court in Messrs. Bird Travels Private Limited versus Amarjit Kaur and others. This is civil appeal number 4589 of 2012. Date of decision is 11th of May 2012. Now, while deciding this case, the matter was ultimately remanded back to the rent controller Chandigarh. But observations in para number 3 and 4 would be most relevant. This is again a 3 judges decision by the Honorable Supreme Court. So I'll be referring to this. Mr. Ashok Mathur, learned counsel for the respondent, submitted there are sufficient material before the High Court for awarding mean profits at the rate of rupees 3 lakh rupees per month from January 2012. We are unable to accept the submission of Mr. Ashok Mathur, learned counsel for the respondent. The fixation of mean profits would require evidence from both sides. We are therefore of the view that the dispute relating to the rate of mean profits must be determined by the rent controller Chandigarh after holding appropriate inquiry. So the Supreme Court remanded the matter to the rent controller to hold an inquiry. But the basis of inquiry has to be some kind of lease deed, some kind of positive evidence, some deposition from the vicinity. It cannot be on the basis of an assumption that I, as a landlord, may say that my property is priceless. So therefore, I may give it to if the tenant is enjoying a stay, it has to be on the basis of some exorbitant amount that he should pay. The court says no. We have to look into the reasonableness, and on the basis of the ratio laid down in Atmaram Properties, the compensation has to be reasonable on the basis of an inquiry that is to be concluded by the rent controller on the basis of positive evidence led by the parties. So therefore, on the basis of all this, the concept of mean profits has evolved in the rent law, and if at all mean profits is liable to be paid by the tenant, these are the scenario, these are the parameters on the basis of which it is to be calculated by the learned authorities below. Now, I would also like to mention that though we are talking about the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act 1949, but the position remains the same in Haryana Act also. In majority of the rent legislation, the position is similar, that strict principles of CPC are not applicable. And even under the new Punjab Rent Act 1995, there is a specific provision of stay under Section 54, and only specific provisions of CPC are made applicable under Section 38 of the same. So therefore, be it 1949 Act or 1995 Act, the position would remain the same. But then we have discussed the basis of mean profits, whether the same shall be made applicable to a particular rent legislation or no. That would depend on the provisions as to whether the same are at par with the civil court or persona designator as in Punjab. So I would conclude by saying that whether the mean profits will be applicable to a particular case or no shall not only be dependent upon the meanness of the landlord, but also on the basis of judicial interpretation. So over to you, Vikasji, and I think I took my more time than what was allocated to me.
No. As long as one is delivering the goods and it just sounds like music if one is speaking on the right note. We have Rajat Malhotra who has posted a question. We are unmuting him. Rajat, you can ask the question as such, and both of them will give their inputs. Or if one gives the input and it suffices, or if somebody actually wants to buttress that, that would also be fine. Rajat.
Many thanks, Vikasji. And my question specifically is that when there is a term specified in the contract agreement between the tenant and the landlord, then also after the termination of that period, one has to file the judgment petition on the grounds basis solely in Section 13. Why cannot we go simply to the court and say that, look, as per the contract, the term has expired, and as such, the tenant should vacate the house? Thank you.
Mr. Malhotra, the answer lies in Section 13 of the East Punjab Rent Act, wherein it is said, notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, code, decree, agreement, consent, or other compromise or anything, the tenant cannot be ejected on any ground except as follows. So therefore, the efflux of time, although was a ground under the Transfer of Property Act Clause A, but is no more a ground under the East Punjab Rent Restriction Act or under the Haryana Act. But probably now under the 95 Act, this ground has been added, but I'll have to look into that.
Right, sir. Avnish, would you like to add something?
No, I think it is very rightly said that as of today, a flux of time is not a ground what we have in Punjab and Haryana. There, of course, there are rent enactments where a contract where the provisions of Rent Act would contain this clause, and if at all it is one of the grounds, then like Transfer of Property Act once the tenancy gets over, either it is renewed or the tenant has to surrender the possession.
Okay. Now the next question is by Mr. Anurag Jain. We are unmuting Anurag. He's an advocate practicing out in Punjab, Haryana. Anurag.
Good evening.
Anurag.
I have not been unmuted. I can hear you. I have unmuted myself.
Anurag, it's not audible. Meanwhile, we will unmute Amar Vivek. Anurag, you just check it at your place. Or meanwhile, Avnish, you can check it on the chat box. Anurag has also posted that question. No, Anurag, you post the question on the chat rather than to me privately, so that Mr. Avnish can read that. Meanwhile, we are unmuting Amar Vivek. He's also from Punjab Haryana High Court. Amar Vivek.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Amar. How are you?
Fine, sir. Thank you very much for a very, very illustrious session, sir. Sir, my question is that in a case instituted by a specified landlord, the court did not issue summons on the prescribed format. Now, the tenant appeared and time was granted for 1 month and thereafter another 1 month for filing reply in routine by the court. After 2.5 months, the landlord filed an application that the tenant should have claimed leave to defend at least on the date when he appeared in the court. So even if there was an irregularity in service of summons initially, that stood cured because sufficient time was given after the tenant joined the proceedings. His application was turned down and later on he moved the High Court, but the petition was not successful. Here on a question of law, pure question of law, we want to seek your opinion because the tenant landlord feels that since it is a matter where the irregularity is not there on his part and the tenant has not claimed the mandatory leave, he wants to move the Supreme Court.
Who should answer?
Anyone?
Amar, what I feel is even if there was an initial mistake by the court in not issuing the summons on the proper format,
Right.
and the tenant did appear, took no objection thereupon, a next date is given. On that date, he did not file an application for leave. The non-issuance of the summons on not a proper format loses all significance. So therefore, you would have a similar situation under section 35B of the full bench judgment of Justice Milaram Sharma in 35B CPC.
Right.
35B was mandatory to the extent that if you don't pay cost on the next date of hearing, your defense is to be struck off.
Right.
But then ultimately the full bench said in that if you don't, if the plaintiff or the person who is entitled to cost does not raise an objection on the next date of hearing, then later on he loses the actionable claim. That is what I feel.
So nice. Much obliged, sir. Thank you very much. After listening to you, after so much.
So this is a old memory only. I mean, I don't know what is the latest law.
No, there is a judgment also of the Honorable Single Bench in our absolutely on all fours, but somehow we could not persuade here.
So we too agree.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
That doesn't become a DB.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so interestingly, Amar Vivek and Lokesh are also coming on the platform, but that time they will be on the other side. That day, Avnish can ask questions to him.
Do you call it tit for tat?
No, not tit for tat. Because we know that he's an erudite speaker, plus he's having immense knowledge.
No, that's
And
right. It's always a pleasure
invariably-
to. Always a pleasure, always.
So invariably, I say that your parents knew it. That is why they knew that your Vivek is Amar. That is why they named you Amar Vivek.
Right. We had teachers like sir all through to guide us.
We have Anurag Jain again unmuted. Anurag, you can ask a question.
I'm audible. I don't know. I'm audible or no.
Anurag,
I'm audible.
somewhat. Yes.
Music.
Sir, I will have to read his question because he's working through the mobile's bandwidth is not to that level. Anurag says, new building in Chandigarh is exempted for how many years from provisions of East Rent Act?
That is 10 years only.
Okay. And now we have Durgesh Agarwal. Again, he's a lawyer from Punjab Haryana High Court. We are unmuting Durgesh Agarwal. Otherwise, his question is, if there is an arbitration clause in the rent agreement, the ejection petition and arbitration proceedings, can they run simultaneously? Durgesh.
No.
Durgesh. So I've read the question again, that issue.
I think the problem would again arise the same. Section 13 would be a bar. Even if the award is given under the Arbitration Act, it becomes non-executable.
Right. So this is by a guest. I don't know who this guest is, but all those in the platform, we never consider them guests. We say that they are all part of the family of Beyond Law because we are all learning from each other mutually. So guest says, as per books, judiciary can't frame laws, but can only interpret it, and judiciary have to see the intention of the lawmakers while doing interpretation. Then how can judiciary strike down a law and declare it unconstitutional in spite of the fact that our parliament has passed laws with some intention? Isn't this act of judiciary ultra vires?
The judicial review is an essential basic feature of the Constitution of India. The judicial review would include the functions of the legislature, an act done by the legislature, the act done by the executive, the act done by anybody. So therefore, the judicial review is a basic feature for the Constitution of India.
Rightly said, and off late, by striking it down, the Honorable Supreme Court has have carved out that manifest arbitrariness. Initially, it was only arbitrariness, illegality, and the other features, but now off late, while striking it down, Talaq case, etc., they have said that there is a manifest arbitrariness, which is the new facet of law. So while we were seeing on the screen gallery, I just saw Aparna, who is always assisting Avnish in the right perspective. So I thought that we invariably ask the persons who are on the platform giving the keynotes. We also ask the persons from that office what are the takes, what they have learned, and if any question they can ask which they could not ask during the court hours, in the office, etc. So we are unmuting Aparna. Firstly, her takes. What are the things which one should learn from both the Mittals? Now I will not say only Avnish. And
No,
number
Avnish
two, and any question if she wants to ask. Over to you, Aparna.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Firstly, I will thank Beyond Law CLC who gave me privilege to work with Justice Mittal, because when I was in the law school by the time he retired, so I never got a chance to work with him. With today's lecture, I got a chance to assist him. So I would thank sir also for guiding me so well. For Mr. Avnish Mittal, I can say whatever today I am, he had taught me very nicely. There are two important things which he taught me in the very beginning, which normally seniors don't tell to their juniors. First thing he said, forget about the law, you should learn the legal ethics. Respect the judge, respect your opponent counsel, and respect the law. Then only you will understand the law. And second, most important thing he has taught me, that never focus on the number of cases you should do in your career. Always focus on the quantity of the case, quality of the cases. More you learn, more you will expose in the world. So he always teach me to focus on doing hard work in my life, and in future I will get the result whenever God want me. So this is, I can say, for Mr. Mittal, and I have learned a lot from both the Mittals, I can say. This is my privilege to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. And we also have Mr. Kamaldeep. Yesterday on the Facebook, he had posted, though we all knew about Justice Vinay Mittal, he had given the insights. So I thought that we should also unmute Kamal so that he can have one-to-one interaction, because the persons who have worked who are working or who have worked in the Punjab Haryana High Court and for Justice Vinay Mittal, I can also say from Madhya Pradesh. So they know the skills and the knowledge which he has. But I thought once Mr. Kamal is there, we are unmuting him. He can also give his insights. Kamal Sera. Mr. Kamal, you will have to unmute yourself.
Now my voice is audible, my lord.
Hi, KD. How are you?
Good evening, Lordship. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr.
Lordship.
Chandran, KD was with me. In fact, he's been like a member of the family with me. He's worked with me for about 5 years, and one of my right hand.
Please, Lordship, for
He has. He was working as hard for me, rather double than I was working, because I would just dictate and go. He would spend nights and nights doing it, and wonderfully good.
thank you.
So I just
Lordship.
wanted
Thank you, Lordship.
Mr. Kamal also to give the inputs. Yes, Mr. Kamal.
First of all, I say all the members who are present here, all are thankful to His Lordship for to be here in this seminar. Secondly, my lord, I have got so much knowledge from His Lordship during my tenure when I worked with him. His knowledge in civil matters can't be compared, can't be matched with anybody else. I have got so much knowledge from His Lordship. That is my only precise words for His Lordship. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can only say, because his parents knew that Kamal means lotus, who can come out of from all the dirt for the brighter brightness. And then Deep is also to bring light in the dark days. So when we are suffering from the dark days during these lockdowns, I thought there couldn't be a better name and better erudite. And like you said, that he always worked during the late days, because his name is Deep and he used to bring the best of all things. That's why.
And when you call him Kamal, I really, because I had always been knowing him as KD.
Yes.
So
Everybody knows me.
Kamal is a stranger to me. KD is my family.
Please, Lord. Everybody knows me with the name of KD in the High Court, but just now I have written in on the.
No, that's right. That's right. I'm only conveying my love to you.
So it's always better, because sometimes it so happens in the market, he goes and some client comes and says, I want to engage KD. Then people will not know who is KD, and then he would like
I know.
as a Kamaldeep.
Please.
Be that as it may, sir, there are no questions. On behalf of Beyond Law CLC, we thank the speakers, the participants on the platform, as well as on the Facebook, those who have participated with us to have the insights from a lawyer and who ultimately became a judge, and then his insights. We had the privilege to have the insights from the judicial mind as well as the legal mind. And again, Avnish, who is, as we said, that he's a bright lawyer. So the brightness, when Kamaldeep is there, so brightness was always flowing out of that. And tomorrow we have a webinar with Justice Paramjit Singh Dhaliwal, former judge of Punjab Haryana High Court, and Justice R.S. Athri, former judge of Punjab Haryana High Court. Both are presidents of Punjab State Consumer Redressal Forum and UT State Consumer Redressal Forum. So tomorrow it's on Consumer Forum. Do stay connected. Again, time 4 p.m. Stay safe, stay healthy, and everyone keep on learning, not only from Beyond Law, but also from the platform Beyond the Law. Everyone stay safe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Avnish. Thank you, sir.